Okay, so Unit 10, Free Time, Lesson C. All right, now we're moving on to Lesson C. But before we do that, let's look at some of the information that we need to remember and to know before we jump into Lesson C. All right, let's talk about future time clauses. All right, now we've talked about clauses before, and now we're going to talk about the future tense, right? Future tense of time clauses. All right, and before we do that, I want to remind you about what we've been talking about, which is very important, about dependent and independent time clauses. All right, this is not something new for us, but I do want to remind us of this because we will be using this, and we will have to think about this when we're dealing with future time clauses. All right. All right. So let's read the definition. An English clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. Okay. There are two types: independent and dependent. An independent clause expresses a complete thought, begins with a capital letter, and ends with a period, question mark, or an exclamation mark. Right? In other words, it is a complete sentence. However, but, a dependent clause, although it also contains a subject and a verb, does not express a complete thought. Therefore, it cannot stand alone. It must be joined to an independent clause. Okay? So remember, if I say a sentence and you have to ask me a question, like either what are you talking about or finish what you're talking about, right? Usually we're dealing with a dependent clause. All right? It needs help. It cannot stand on its own. It needs help. If I say something like, for instance, in our first example, it was raining, and I put a period there, well, you wouldn't ask me. Usually, you'd say, okay, it was raining. That's fine. All right? But if I said, when I left the house this morning, you would say, okay, what happened, right? Because I started off with when I left the house this morning. So obviously, I need to tell you some more information, right? That is a dependent clause. So when we put these two together, it's important that we see the independent clause and the dependent clause. All right? So it was raining when I left the house this morning. Okay, so let's look at the second one here. She went home early because she didn't feel well. So if I said she went home early, period, that would be an independent clause, right? If I said because she didn't feel well, you'd probably ask me what happened after that, right? Keep going, right? So that tells us that is our dependent clause. When we put it together, it completes the future time clause. She went home early because she didn't feel well. In these examples, the dependent clauses follow the independent clauses. Okay? However, you can start a sentence with a dependent clause as long as you separate it from the independent or main clause with a comma, as you will see in these next examples. All right? So with these examples, we didn't use a comma because we had independent and then dependent. But we can write this same clause using dependent and independent. And when we do that, we have to use a comma to separate the two clauses. All right? So here's the first example. When I left the house this morning, comma, it was raining. So when I left the house this morning is our dependent clause. It was raining is our independent clause. Next example. Because she didn't feel well, comma, she went home early. Because she didn't feel well, excuse me, because she didn't feel well is our dependent clause. She went home early is our independent clause. Okay? Let's look at some more. Future time clauses are dependent clauses that must be joined to an independent or main clause. We usually use the future tense in the independent clause and the present tense in the dependent or time clause. All right? Do not use the future tense in the time clause. All right? Do not use the future tense in the time clause. Study the examples below. In each case, the independent or main clause is in bold type. Okay? So here's a correct way of saying this clause. When the movie ends, comma, I'm going to bed. Okay? When the movie ends, so ends is our is our present tense. I'm going, so that is now I'm sorry. So when the movie ends, that's our present tense. This is our dependent clause, right? I'm going to bed. This is our independent clause, and it's in the future tense. I am or I'm going, right, to bed. That's the correct way. The incorrect way would say, when the movie will end, I am going to bed. So we don't need this will end. It has to be changed to ends, all right, because this is future tense. So this is saying future tense, dependent, independent. So that's incorrect. Let's look at another example. I'll feel more relaxed after I finish my project. That's correct. Okay. Independent, our independent clause is in bold. I'll feel more relaxed. Okay. Dependent clause is after I finish my project. Incorrect way. I'll feel more relaxed after I will finish my project. All right, that's incorrect. We cannot use the future tense in the time clause or the dependent clause. All right. Future time clauses begin with the words such as when, as soon as, after, before, until, and while. Below are a few example sentences. As you saw earlier, a comma separates the time clause from the main or the independent clause when time clause comes first. Okay, so let's look at the example. When I finish the dishes, comma, I'll help you with your homework. That's one way of writing it. Dependent clause is first. When I finish the dishes. Dependent clause is after. I'll help you with your homework. We can rewrite this so that we don't need a comma, where our independent clause is first, and then our time or dependent clause is last. All right. I'll help you, or I will help you with your homework when I finish the dishes. The next one. As soon as I finish the dishes, comma, I will help you with your homework. This is using as soon as. We can rewrite this so we don't need the comma. I'll help you with your homework as soon as I finish the dishes. We have, in the second sentence, we have our dependent and then our independent clause. Third example, using the word after. After I finish the dishes, comma, I will or I'll help you with your homework. We can rewrite that. I'll help you with your homework after I finish the dishes. Fourth example, we use the word before. Before I go home, I'll finish this report. We can rewrite that by putting our dependent clause first. I'll finish this report before I go home. Let's use the word until. Until I finish this report, comma, I won't go home. Let's put our dependent clause first. I won't go home until I finish this report. And then the last one, we're going to use the word while. While I am waiting for the bus, comma, I'll drink my coffee, or I will drink my coffee. Let's reverse it without the comma. I'll drink my coffee while I'm waiting for the bus. Okay? So now we've gone through more information about future time clauses. All right? And we have used the words when, as soon as, after, before, until, and while. Okay, so we know what these look like. All right, so now if we turn our books over to page 126, we can now look at lesson C, future time clauses. All right, and the grammar focus for this one is going to be clauses with after and before. All right, we've looked at a bunch of them, but this book wants us to focus on just after and before because we are using conditionals. All right, if and then, we will use after and before. Use after and before to introduce adverb clauses to talk about the order of future plans. Use after plus the present tense of the verb to introduce the first event. Use the future tense in the main clause, right? Use before plus the present tense verb to introduce the second event. Use the future tense in the main clause. All right, two different ways of talking about the same thing, before and after. Let's use after. After Kim finishes school, comma, he will take a vacation. We can rewrite that. Kim will take a vacation. Excuse me. Kim will take a vacation after he finishes school. First event, finish school. Second event, take a vacation. Let's use the same sentence using before. Okay? Before Kim takes a vacation, comma, he will finish school. Or we can rewrite that. Kim will finish school before he takes a vacation. All right? Let's look at our useful language box. In blue, use a comma when if, before, and after clauses are at the end. Are at the at the beginning of a sentence. All right, so that's pretty useful. Use a comma when if, before, and after clauses are at the beginning of a sentence. So we see that here with after, right? After Kim finishes school, comma, right? We see that with before when we see before Kim takes a vacation. All right, and if it was if, it's a conditional. If Kim takes a vacation, then he will finish school, right? But yeah, okay. All right, so we've looked at that. We've looked at clauses with before and after, our future time clauses. So now let's practice a little bit. All right. A, write the complete sentence. I'm sorry, right. Complete the sentences. Use the correct form of the verb. Write number 1 above the first event and write number 2 above the second event. All right. Let's look at the first one. Kara will talk, right? That's the proper tense of talk, to a travel agent before she books. That's the proper tense of the word book. A flight. All right. Okay, so Kara will talk to the agent, to the travel agent, before she books a flight. Makes sense. So let's take some time and fill out the rest of these 2 through 10. Okay. You can also scan the barcode here at the bottom of the page to follow along with the audio of this. But the biggest thing we need to do is write the correct tense of the verbs. Okay? So let's take some time, pause the video, and let's do that, and we'll come back and discuss our answers. All right. Okay, so I hope you had some time to go through these and figure out the correct form of the verb. All right. And if you had trouble, you could always listen to the track and go and read along and do the exercise along with the track, the audio track. All right. So let's go over the answers and see what we get here. All right. So the first one is done for us. Kara will talk to the travel agent before she books a flight. Number 2, before Cynthia. So we need the proper form, proper form of this verb, leave. Before Kara leaves for Puerto Rico, she, and then the proper form of the verb, buy, right? Will buy some books. I'm sorry, will buy some new clothes. Okay. Before Cynthia leaves for Puerto Rico, she will buy some new clothes. Number 3, Donald, and then the proper form of the word take, a taxi to the hotel after he, then the proper form of the phrase will, before he, proper form of the phrase pick up his baggage, right? So I wrote down, Donald will take a taxi to the hotel after he picks up his baggage. All right. So we notice here there's no comma, so we can write it that way. All right. Number 4, the campers, the proper form of the verb, make a fire before they, proper form of the verb, cook their dinner. All right. And there's no comma here. So I wrote down, the campers will make a fire before they cook their dinner. All right. Number 5, after they, the proper form of the verb for finish eating, comma, right? They, proper form of the phrase clean up the campsite. So I wrote down, after they finish eating, comma, they will clean up the campsite. All right. Number 6, I, and then the proper form of the verb call, you after I, proper form of the verb return from my trip, no comma. I will call you after I return from my trip. Alright? Number 7. After I, the proper form of the verb, get my passport, comma, I, proper form of the verb, make the reservations. I wrote down, after I get my passport, comma, I will make the reservations. Number 8. Before we, proper form of the verb, go to Mexico, comma, we, proper form of the verb, learn some words in Spanish. So I wrote down, before we go to Mexico, comma, we will learn some words in Spanish. Alright. Number 9. Jack, proper term of the verb, lock the doors before he, proper form of the verb, leave for the airport, and no comma, right? So Jack, I wrote down, Jack will lock the doors before he leaves for the airport. Number 10. Maria, proper form of the verb, print her boarding pass before she, proper form of the verb, go to the airport. No comma. I wrote down, Maria will print her boarding pass before she goes to the airport. Alright? And I did not write the first and second event. I just went ahead and just did, I just used the correct, I wrote in the correct form of the verb. Alright? So hopefully you got these answers correct, along with mine. If not, please listen to the track again, or go through our future time clause explanations with more specifically using after and before. All right. And then hopefully you will come back with these answers. All right. Okay, so let's move along and turn our books over to page 127.